My father used to go up to Brook Green Gardens as a little fellow, and Dr. Ward Flagg in the 1893 storm, he and his sister were tied to a tree at what is now Huntington Beach Park, and they watched his entire family wash out to sea in that storm. And anyway, he was a hermit doctor back at what is now Brook Green Gardens, and Daddy would go up there to visit with him as a little fellow. And his guardian, Tim Duncan, everywhere Dr. Flagg went, Daddy would follow him. And so Tim Duncan named him Little Doc, and it stuck. And he became Big Doc, and I'm Little Doc.
I grew up in Winnsboro, South Carolina, near Columbia.
And when did you come to this area?
We married in 1957. I came some in the summer. My uncle had a house on the Pawleys Island, but I didn't know Doc until in the 50s. Been here ever since.
Well, I was born in Manning. My mother went home there. I mean, she didn't want to get caught on the ferry. And see, the bridge coming from Georgetown wasn't built until 1938. And you had the Cornwallis and the Pelican, and if you had a foggy night, you couldn't get to Georgetown. All the doctors were down there. So she decided to go home to Manning with her parents. I was born up then. Except for 6 months, I've lived at Pawleys Island. Waverly Mills, what used to be the post office for this area, was known as Waverly Mills from 1935, and changed to Pawleys Island then. But I grew up at Waverly. They had to spend the winter at Waverly and then summer on Pawleys Island. Well, my great-grandfather bought Waverly in 1871. It used to be in the Alston family. It's A-L-L-S-T-O-N family. And it had a big rice mill. They had a lumber company, and they had rice, and they had a barrel factory, and had a railway for boats. And it was, but rice went down from the 70s on down to 1910 was last year that they planted, 1910 or 11. I think they had 3 years where they had freshets and flooded the rice crop out. And that was pretty well the end of it for South Carolina. And I remember the machinery in the mill was sold to a Ford Motor Company for their museum in Dearborn. I don't think they've ever put it up, but all the equipment is up there. I still have a piece of it, and my sister still has a piece of it. So we're still in the family.
Sister lives in that.
She's Alberta Quattlebaum. I went here to a 2-room schoolhouse here at Pawleys, right at the crossroads on the North Causeway. And we had, for 7 years, we had 2 rooms. Biggest class I had was 4. When I went to Georgetown, I thought I'd gone to a major university for high school. But it took a 2-hour bus trip to school and a 2-hour bus trip back. So it was a pretty long day. Well, I grew up during the Depression. looking back on it, we had a pretty good life, but we'd come over in the summer, but to make money, we my two aunts, Miss Isabel and Miss Martha Lachicotte, had a dairy, and we had to go over there every day and milk those cows. And I promised God if I ever made enough money, I would never milk another cow, which I haven't, thank goodness. We didn't have anything, but nobody else did either, so you didn't really know you were that bad off. Georgetown, until the paper mill came, Georgetown went from being the richest county in America, being one of the 25 poorest in the 30s. But see, prior to the Civil War, the rice planters over here lived like kings. But my great-grandfather came up to run the rice mill in 1850 for Colonel Ward. And so we had a fairly close connection with Brookery. My father opened the Hammock Shop in 1938, and I remember we had one of my friends, Joe Ford, a black friend, he and I made all the hammocks. And we had Ed, what was his last name? Brown. He made the sticks, and so we manufactured hammocks. I think my father bought the land and built the hammock shop and stocked it, which includes where this house is, for $1,500 back in 1936. So times have changed.
He built the shop when they paved the road, didn't he?
Yeah. The year the road was paved, they built a bridge and then they paved the road, and it was called US 17. But prior to that, my father and mother had a small two-room shop over on the island that she pretty well worked. But the hammock shop was started in 1938. They still have a demonstration here, but they don't make them here now. I sold it to Phil Prince in '84, and he in turn sold it to Hatteras in '94, I think. Or
That's the hammock manufacturing.
The hammock manufacturing plant.
After we married, I was put to work.
And what did you do for the hammock shops?
Well, I eased into the buying for the hammock shops. Doc finished Clemson in horticulture and came home. I didn't know him back then, but he started a landscape nursery in connection with the hammock shop, so that the hammock shop was busy in the summer and then business just cut off back then. But the nursery cranked up in the fall, and they did a lot of work in the fall and winter months. So that sort of brought income into the business more year-round. And about the time I came on the scene, Doc was ready to expand the business, but his father wasn't in the mood to do that, so he built a garden shop on the grounds. And it started off with just fertilizers and sprays and vases and things, like that, and garden statuary. But little by little, it expanded into other things. And it seemed like every year Doc would add a side porch, and then he'd enclose it and add another porch. It grew. As time went on, I helped his mother buy for the original shop. And as they got older, I stepped in more and more. And they dealt a lot with old prints and books and local crafts and that sort of thing. And it grew. and also when Doc's father died, he moved the manufacturing off-site to another area across the highway. And he converted that space into various shops that we rented out to people. We owned the land, but other people owned the businesses. And we still ran 3 of the businesses.
Yeah.
So I was buyer mainly. We have 3 daughters. Seal, who's Seal Spivey now, and she and her husband live in Pineapolis. They have 2 children. And Ginger, married to Charles Amar, they live in Beaufort and have a gift shop. And it was in her genes, I think. And then Lou, our youngest daughter, lives next door and has 1 son, Adam.
My father's family native. Like I told you, my grandfather moved here in 1850. He was captured unloading a blockade runner. And
Your great-grandfather.
I mean my great-grandfather, excuse me, my great-grandfather. He was captured unloading a blockade runner in the North St. River. Spent the war in Philadelphia as a prisoner of war. Came back and bought Waverly in 1871 and on his own. Then my grandfather and his brother, my grandfather, Francis Williams Lachicotte, and his brother, St. Julian Lachicotte, and my great-grandfather ran the mill, and the great-grandfather died about 1890, and the others lived to the 1920s, 1930s. And anyway, but after 1910, things went pretty well downhill, and all the machinery was sold off. And one of the best jobs in Georgetown County in my youth was being a superintendent of one of these plantations. But it wasn't until the paper mill came in 1936 that Georgetown had any prosperity, really. But it's come a long way since then. But with the depression right now, or recession, or whatever we have, we may go back. My mother's family originally came to this country to Indiantown, which is just across the county line. She was Judge John S. Wilson's daughter, and he grew up in near Indiantown, what they call Union, where D.I. Wilson's grandfather grew up, was northwest Georgetown County. And then he was a judge and went to Manning. And the family, outside the family, grew up, my mother and all grew up in Manning. She came down here to teach school, and that's how she met my father. And then they were married, I forgot the year, 20,
I don't remember.
somewhere around 1920. But you had a 1-room schoolhouse over here back in those days. And that building has been moved to the Hammock Shop years ago. It used to be Lower Waverly Plantation. We moved it to the Hammock Shop. And it's now, it was a men's store a few years ago. I don't know what, I've forgotten what they had in there right now, but it's on the grounds. The Springs family, Lachicotte family, Ward family, Alstons, all of them went to school there back in those days. But my father left that school, went to Clemson in 1909. So apparently did a pretty good job. We used to deliver milk from my 2 aunts on the beach, and I had to go over there and milk those cows and bottle it and bring milk and deliver it to the boarding houses. And Mr. Bull, the preacher, said we had a little bit of profanity as to who would deliver the milk.
I think they had a dog that would snap at you, and they didn't. Neither one of them wanted to go to the house to deliver the milk.
I thought she did a great job, but she did that shortly after she finished college. And but she worked on it about 4 or 5 years. And I don't know how many printings it's had now. It's had about 15 printings, I think.
It's an excellent book.
But anyway, she spent a lot of time on it.
She did it all, took the pictures, did the research and everything. It was really
She really did a
quite
great
an
job, I
undertaking.
thought. And people seem to like it. And she's updated it and from time to time. Well, if you came down here, you either belonged to All Saints or you didn't belong to the church. And when I grew up, and the first other church to come in was the Presbyterian church. But the year I was baptized, my parents joined the Episcopal church. My mother was Presbyterian. She always said, she's when near the Episcopalian, scratching you scratch Presbyterian. But the Blaine Methodist Church used to be where Wilbur Plantation is now. And they moved that church in 1920 to Merle's Inlet. And when I came along in 26, they joined All Saints. And of course, I've been a member ever since. But most people don't know that Blaine used to be Paula's own.
There are 4 congregations now that were at one time a part of All Saints in this community. The Lord is at work.
Yeah.
Well, Jeep Ford and Jack Blunt. We're the last of the Mohicans, I think. Some of the girls, a good many of the girls are still around. Peggy Thomas, Jane Williams died last year. Weezy Ford and her sister Sarah was in my class.
Rapard, Jean Rapard.
Yeah,
What was
Jean,
her?
She was Jean Dent. We've had a couple of reunions. I think now we better take the whole 4-year group and bring them together. Well, I thought I'd go into a major university when I went to high school. But I remember Ms. Bynum and Mr. Bynum, he was principal and she taught algebra. And Nat Kaminsky's wife, she was a Morgan back then. She taught, I think she taught geometry. I went to school in the war years, and we couldn't participate in too many things because you had gasoline rationing. And you didn't. We were pretty well isolated over here back in those days, so you couldn't participate in sports and other things because nobody had gasoline. See, I graduated high school in '43. And went to Clemson for a year and a half, went in the Army, and then came back and finished. But until after World War II, gasoline was pretty well rationed. I remember on the island, every beach house was blacked out. Anything facing the ocean, the windows were blacked out for submarines. So I do remember going to Georgetown when Roosevelt and Churchill met at Hobcaw and seeing all those destroyers in the harbor in Winyaw Bay, but they both met in Hobcaw twice on 2 occasions.
To meet them?
No, nobody met them, but we knew they were there. They had pretty heavy security. But I thought it was interesting that some of the major decisions of World War II were decided in Georgetown, South Carolina.
Did you know Baruch?
I met Mr. Baruch once. Came up, James F. Burns came to the Hammock Shop one Sunday afternoon. I remember meeting him, and I think he gave me a quarter, and I think I kept it forever. But I've heard about him all my life, but I knew his daughter, Miss Bell, real well. When I say real well, I knew her very blatantly. And Martha, I went on a trip to New York trying to sell hammocks, and she came by the booth to see how we were getting along, which was mighty nice for her to do. Because we were 2 little country boy and girl, pretty well lost in the big city. And a booth at the Columbus, what was it? The
New York garden show, flower show, yeah.
Well, you had food stamps and other sugar, meat. Well, I don't think we ever did without. I mean, you could always go in the creek and catch shrimp and oysters and other things, which some areas couldn't do. But we lived, as kids, we lived in the creek, catching crabs, getting oysters. We never went hungry. And but both white and black, we all lived in the creek, gigging for flounders. The girls would pull shrimp nets, would pick a shrimp on the beach. I remember my two aunts, a ritual with whatever you caught, they were cooking. They would cook the shrimp with the heads on. I remember that. Now you didn't cook them with the heads off, but they'd cook them with the heads on. I remember that. It was a big thing. Everybody gathered around this table and pick shrimp, head shrimp, pick them, and then you'd pick crabs. A lot of, they had a 3-month season they had a boating house, and you'd have a 3-month season when people would come down. But from September through May, you didn't have many people. Nobody stayed on the beach back in those days. We got electricity at Waverly in 1946. So we had gas lights back there. I remember when I took my mustering, I paid to put electricity in the house. My oldest sister was getting married. They put electricity, so that was a big step for us. But you were isolated over here on the Waccamaw Neck back in those days, because you didn't have gasoline and you couldn't participate with your classmates in Georgetown. But now the whole situation has changed. All the businesses are moving over here. Georgetown has shrunk a little bit. I know they had the Coast Guard, a lot of boys joined the Coast Guard, and you had the Coast Guard on Brook Green, Devidew, all those beaches. They'd have to patrol the beaches along with Paul's Island. And some of those boys stayed, like Charlie McConnell, who worked for Comanche for years. Jean Dent's husband. Several other people. On shorthand, I can't remember all the names, but I'd say 8 or 10. One of them married, Steve Jook was one. His son, is a doctor in Columbia now. Married Mildred Avant. See, I went to Clemson when I was 16, and I went a semester and a half. Then went in the Army for 2 years, and then came back and finished at 49. I remember my father used to take me to go in the ferry boat, and you'd be down there all day. But you'd go to Ford's store, they had just about everything. Or Fogels or Ringles. You'd go by the coat house or whatever, but if it got to be a foggy night, you had to go by Conway to get back home, because the ferry wouldn't run if it was foggy. But the ferry left Georgetown on the foot of Front Street and came on over just north of the bridge, the existing bridge right now, to Paulus. And they would cross. They had the Cornwallis and the Pelican. And they'd hold 3 cars on each side and one in the back. And 7 cars total. I remember the last time, one of the things I really remember, KP Morris had an airplane, a double-wing airplane, and it crashed on the beach. And one Sunday afternoon, and we had the St. Germain girls and Lisa Bruce and some of them staying over at our place. And it crashed right in front of the house, and Violet St. Germain was in it. And I remember going back about a month later, and that plane, the fuselage, that plane and the wings, they put it on the ferry to take to Georgetown to repair it. So, but he was coming in, and people cried at him. He had to head in the ocean, and it tipped up.
But they survived.
Yeah, both survived. Well, we've given some records of the rice mill over there. I knew Dr. Bell very well. He married Miss Ida Ford, Jeep Ford's uncle, brother-in-law to Ralph and Mr. Albert Ford Sr. And my father roomed with Mr. Albert Ford at Clemson. Back in, he finished, both of them finished 1913. They were isolated up there. Pitiful letters. Please bring me home. Before the paper mill came in, the Georgetown was, you know, as well as I remember, they were kind of run down. And because really, the Ford store probably did the best, but they worked for all the plantations. And like Mr. Huntington, Mr. Ford would pay all the bills at Brook Green Plantation. And then he, once a month or whatever, Mr. Huntington would pay him. But until the paper mill came, these stores were sort of run down. Really, nobody had a whole lot of money in Georgetown. But once the paper mill came, you'd see storefronts being freshened up, and made a great impact on the town and the county, in fact. And they've been good neighbors forever. They've really been good neighbors to Georgetown. And Howard Hinman did an awful lot for Georgetown. Built the ballpark, built the Winyard Bay Country Club, had the Black River House. Everybody in Georgetown loved Howard. Until he died, he came over and spoke to people that worked for him back in the 50s. But his father, you know, was head of the entire International Paper Company Corporation. But Howard did more for Georgetown than any one single person I remember, giving back to the city. Well, since I was in the nursery business, I went into a lot of the plantation. I did yard work, Brazilian camellia spraying, but over here, the most elaborate plantation was Arcadia, and I guess Squirrel Wood, Litchfield, was pretty, but the development around that, you had the plantation of Santee, Esterville, and I think Dover's really turned out to be a beautiful place. But that house was moved from Santee Lakes and owned by Harry Butler now. But he's done a good job of fixing it up and maintaining it. But Miss Henry Sage moved that house piece by piece from Lake Moultrie. But I was fortunate enough to work on a lot of them, and I knew a lot of the caretakers. And if you grew up down here, you got to know everybody. I don't know everybody who's moved in since the 50s, but I used to know all those who grew up here. I met Mr. Yorkie several times. Never saw him except in hunting clothes. He'd come down in the fall and leave before spring training. But he was another person who did a lot for this county. Certainly did wonders for the hospital and for Tower Hall, and he put in the X-ray center recently. The Yorkie Foundation did. But he was helped an awful lot of people in Georgetown. I'd hate to tell you how many he helped that I know of. But he enjoyed it down here. He had South Island, North Island, and my Pleasant Plantation. And then he leased the land, a lot of land up around Pleasant Hill and hunt quail. But he hunted a fish basically every day. His caretaker had a Georgian house, and he and his wife had 2 trailers and a big room in between, as well as I remember. Everybody knew about it, but nobody dared go near it.
It was different. It wasn't as isolated because they did have the bridge. It was a drawbridge. And I had some of the same worries that Doc's mom had, that the drawbridge wouldn't open because it had a way of breaking down every now and then. But we made it to the hospital in time each time. The seasons were like from, I guess, Easter to Labor Day was the busy time at Pauley's. And once Labor Day came, it was quiet. Golf, of course, has prolonged the season. And so it's different now. And I guess the one thing, I miss Columbia. Growing up in Winsboro, we went to Columbia every time we needed something. And Charleston was twice as far, 3 times as far away as Columbia had been from Winsboro. So I miss the shopping, but it didn't take long to adjust to that, really. Your needs were not as great here. We ended up going to New York every year, but we always went to Charlotte. Charlotte had a gift show too. And you could see there what a lot of places around were buying, but we wanted to be different, you know, and have things that they didn't see in Charlotte. We went to Atlanta some, but New York seemed to be the place to go. So we, every February, the worst time of year to be up there, but anyway, it was a lot of fun. A lot of work, but a lot of fun too. Yeah.
She'd go up and buy, and I'd try to sell hammocks.
Yeah.
But we had Gene Thompson that came in to help her.
Yeah, we met Gene Thompson at the New York Gift Show. One of the fellows that had the hammock in his line of imported gifts and stuff had a showroom every year at the show, and so we'd gather there at the end of the day and go out to dinner together. And there was always a different crowd, but a core group that was the same, but different ones would pop in. And Jean and her partner up in Connecticut had a shop. And so somehow or other they got to get in that mix. And when Jean's marriage broke up in Connecticut, she decided to relocate, and she was headed down to Florida. But she stopped off on the way to see us and liked the area and ended up staying in this area. So she and I shared the load then of buying. I was doing it on my own before, but we were growing by then, and I needed help.
And she
ended up buying the general store. When we started easing out of the business, she bought the general store. It's not called that anymore now, but was for a long time.
And she still lives on the creek. Bought that old Don Richardson house.
Mm-hmm. But going back to your original question, it wasn't nearly as isolated in the 50s, but that was when the Litchfields started being developed about 1960 on, and so I really have seen a lot of development since I came down here. It was widened after I got here. It started out being a 2-lane highway in 35 to 38. When was it that it was paved?
38.
But then after we married, it was made a 4-lane. And that was real. And then we got a stoplight. Now we have more than one, and I'm thankful for it, because otherwise we'd never get out on the highway.
Really growing. I think back when they developed Litchfield, they put those lots on for sale in 1957. You could buy an oceanfront and then throw in a second row lot for $5,500. Now the prices, even with this recession, their prices fall more than that.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, then they went to North Litchfield 2-3 years later, about 1960, and started developing that. But it's been a lot of growth. Litchfield Country Club, I think, was the first golf course. I think that and what is now the what's the name of the one down here?
Founders Club.
Founders Club, were the first 2 golf courses down here. Now there are 12 golf courses in the Paula's Myrtles on it area.
Are you a golfer?
I play at it, but I didn't take it up. I was too old, but we do have Caledonia and True Blue, our group. So I'm around it even though I don't play very well. Yes, ma'am. We fish for flounder and inshore fishing. I don't go outside anymore. I like bird shooting. I don't care about killing animals. I shoot doves and ducks. But I don't guess there's any difference. It's just at my age, I want it easy.
I have cleaned the fish, but he usually does.
I clean the fish. She cooks it. But I don't know. It's been it's been interesting to be in business for yourself, and we've seen a lot of changes. Who knows what's going to happen in the future? But this has been a good area to live in and grow, build, raise a family. And I think when I look around, I had to go to New York a couple of times to really appreciate what we had right here. But
He is a country boy.
but I'm glad I grew up where I did. But we have the freshwater. You got the freshwater river, 3 miles from the fresh saltwater creek and the ocean. Not many places in the country you have that. So I think we live in a special place. Very fortunate to make a living, thank goodness. So I think God has blessed us all.